My dad drained my entire college fund to spoil his stepdaughter. He thought I'd stay quiet until I made a move that sent his perfect life into chaos. My 20-year-old male dad has always been the most entitled person I've ever known. Growing up, everything was always about him and his image. We lived in this upper-middle-class neighborhood where he was obsessed with keeping up appearances. The dude would literally go into debt to buy things we couldn't afford just so the neighbors would think he was successful. A new car every 3 years, even though the old one worked fine. Expensive watches he'd casually mention were gifts from clients. You get the picture. I remember when I was 10, we had this neighborhood barbecue, and he spent like $500 on a fancy new grill just for the event. Then, he bragged to everyone about how it was nothing special, and he just picked it up last weekend on a whim. Meanwhile, I heard him and Mom fighting the night before because we were behind on the electric bill. That was my dad, in short. He was also the king of guilt trips. Anytime I needed something as a kid, he'd make this big show about how much he sacrificed for me. "Do you know how hard I worked to put food on this table?" was his favorite line, even though my mom was actually paying most of the bills. He'd use that manipulation tactic for everything, from school supplies to doctor visits. It made me feel like a burden for just existing. When I was 13, I made the baseball team and needed new cleats. Mom was out of town for work, so I had to ask him. You'd think I'd asked for a Ferrari the way he carried on, sighing dramatically, making calls to move some money around, telling me we'd have to tighten our belts for the rest of the month. Then, the next weekend, he bought himself new golf clubs that cost literally 10 times what my cleats did. But those were an investment because he was networking with important clients, right? My parents split when I was 12. The divorce was nasty, mostly because my dad couldn't accept that my mom was the one who wanted out. His precious ego couldn't handle being the one left behind. He dragged out the proceedings for almost 2 years, fighting her on every little thing, even when it made no sense financially. Pure spite. During the divorce, he actually tried to get primary custody of me, not because he wanted me around, but because he knew it would hurt my mom and he'd get more child support. When the judge saw through his nonsense and gave Mom primary custody, he acted heartbroken in court, then took me for fast food after and spent the whole time on his phone, ignoring me. That was the last time he pretended to want me around. Then came Karen. He met her at some work function about 6 months after my mom moved out. Karen was your typical trophy wife material, 10 years younger than him, always perfectly put together, and desperate to climb the social ladder. She laughed at all his jokes, stroked his ego, and basically worshipped the ground he walked on, exactly what he needed after the blow to his self-esteem from the divorce. Karen had her own agenda from day one. She'd been a single mom struggling to maintain her lifestyle after divorcing some rich guy who turned out to be not so rich. Funny enough, she was smart enough to keep her assets separate. The house was in her name from the jump. Guess she wasn't as naive as she acted. My dad was her meal ticket back to the country club. She knew exactly how to play him, acting impressed by his success, asking his advice on everything, making him feel like the big man. It was honestly embarrassing to watch. She had a daughter, a 17-year-old female from her previous marriage. Let's call her Mackenzie. From day one, Mackenzie was treated like royalty in that house. She was the same age as me, but that's where the similarities ended. While I was average in pretty much every way, Mackenzie was this conventionally pretty, popular cheerleader type who knew exactly how to manipulate adults to get what she wanted. She had my dad wrapped around her finger within weeks. She'd pull stunts like calling him daddy. Her real dad was still in the picture, by the way, and doing this fake, helpless act whenever she needed something. "Daddy, I don't understand this math homework," she'd say with a pouty face. And suddenly my dad, who never once helped with my homework, is clearing his schedule to sit with her for hours. Meanwhile, I'd be struggling with a school project in the next room and get told to figure it out because I needed to learn independence. By the time they got married, barely a year after my parents' divorce was finalized, the dynamic was set. My dad and Karen would spend ridiculous amounts of money on Mackenzie while I got the bare minimum. And I mean bare minimum. I remember one Christmas where Mackenzie got a MacBook Pro and designer clothes while I got whatever. Karen enabled all of this. She'd give these fake concerned looks when I'd point out the obvious favoritism, saying things like, "Well, Mackenzie's going through so much with the adjustment," or your father just wants to make sure she feels welcome in the family. This went on for years. Meanwhile, Mackenzie knew exactly what was happening and would smirk at me behind their backs. Once I overheard Mackenzie and her friends laughing about how she could get my dad to buy her anything. I'd just do the sad eyes thing and call him daddy, and bam, new phone. They were literally mocking how easy he was to manipulate while wearing the clothes he bought her. When she saw me listening, she just winked. I started spending most of my time at my mom's place, only going to dad's every other weekend as required by the custody agreement. Even then, half the time he'd have to work or would be taking Karen and Mackenzie on weekend trips that somehow I wasn't invited to. When I was there, I was treated like an inconvenient house guest rather than family. Whenever I needed anything for school or whatever, suddenly he was tight on cash, or I needed to learn financial responsibility. But there was always money from Mackenzie's dance competitions, cheer camps, or whatever hobby she picked up for 2 weeks before getting bored. So I did exactly what he said. I learned financial responsibility. The summer I turned 16, I got a job bussing tables at this restaurant near my mom's house. Minimum wage, plus whatever tips the servers would throw my way. Not glamorous, but it was my money that no one could make me feel guilty about spending. The joint bank account was actually my dad's idea, which is the most ironic part of this whole story. He showed up at the restaurant one day, acting all concerned about my financial future, said he was proud of me for working and wanted to help me set up a proper savings account. Since I was a minor, I needed an adult on the account anyway, so it made sense. The bank lady explained everything, and I remember feeling pretty good when I deposited my first paycheck. Dad even acted impressed, told me I was being so responsible, probably the only genuine compliment he ever gave me. Over the next 4 years, I worked my butt off, double shifts, weekends, holidays. I took whatever hours they'd give me. I watched that balance grow while dreaming about college, finally getting away from his toxic behavior and Karen's fake sympathy. Meanwhile, Mackenzie went through 3 total cars, all replaced immediately, got caught shoplifting, charges mysteriously disappeared, and failed half her classes, still got into a decent college because Dad made a donation. By the time I hit 20, I had nearly $18,000 saved up, not life-changing money for most people, but for me, it was a big deal. I had it all planned out, another year of saving, and I'd have enough to cover my first 2 years of tuition and a decent apartment near campus. I'd applied for some scholarships too and was waiting to hear back. For once, things were looking up. I was careful with that money too, no impulse purchases, no splurging. Even when my piece of crap car died, I took the bus for 6 months rather than dip into my savings. I fixed my own phone when the screen cracked instead of buying a new one. Every dollar represented freedom from my dad and his nonsense. Then came that day at the bank. It was just a normal Tuesday. I stopped by before my shift to pull some cash for the weekend, simple transaction, done it a million times before. But this time, the teller's face changed when she looked at her screen. My stomach dropped before she even said anything. "I'm sorry, but there are insufficient funds in your account." I just stood there, blinking like an idiot. Those words didn't compute. I asked her to check again, thinking it had to be a mistake. She clicked around for a bit and then turned the screen so I could see it. A withdrawal, the entire balance, all $18,000 and change, gone. The date stamp showed it happened barely a month ago. That's when everything clicked. Mackenzie's sudden trip to Cancun with her besties, the designer clothes she'd been posting on Instagram, her caption about the best surprise ever from the best dad ever, all paid for with my money. Money I'd earned working doubles while she was out partying and posting selfies. I walked out of that bank feeling like I was going to throw up, sat on a bench outside, and called him right there. When he picked up, I didn't waste time with small talk. I straight up asked him why he'd emptied my account. His response? "You don't need it right now," Mackenzie did. "You can always earn more later." Just like that, like my 4 years of busting my butt meant nothing, like what I'd saved was just pocket change I could easily replace, like his stepdaughter somehow deserved my money more than I did. That was the moment I decided this manipulative, entitled man was finally going to learn what consequences felt like. After I hung up on my dad, I just sat on that bench outside the bank for like an hour, straight up shaking with rage. I'd been angry before, but this was different. This was next-level fury that made my vision blur. 4 years of my life, thousands of hours of work, all my sacrifices, gone in one transaction so Mackenzie could post bikini pics from Cancun. I couldn't just let this slide, not this time. This wasn't about the money anymore, it was about years of being treated like I didn't matter. Years of watching him bend over backward for his new family while tossing scraps my way. When I could finally think straight enough to move, I called my mom. She's always been the level-headed one, and I needed someone who wouldn't tell me I was overreacting. When I told her what happened, she went dead silent, not because she didn't believe me, she knew exactly what he was capable of, but because she was calculating just how low he'd sunk this time. "Come over now. Bring all your bank statements," she said in this tone I rarely heard from her. I crashed at her place that night, both of us too pissed to sleep. By morning, she'd already made a dozen calls and had her laptop open with like 20 tabs. My mom might look like a sweet kindergarten teacher, but cross her kid, and she turns into a darn tactician. First thing we did was call the bank to understand our options. The answer was exactly what I feared, since he was a joint account holder. Legally, he had every right to withdraw the money. Technically not theft, morally messed up beyond belief, but not illegal. "So we can't get the money back through the bank," my mom said after hanging up. "But that doesn't mean we're powerless." That's when we started mapping out the plan. If we couldn't hit him legally, we'd hit him where it actually hurt, his precious reputation and financial stability. See, my dad's whole identity is wrapped up in how others perceive him: Mr. Successful, Mr. Family Man, Mr. Pillar of the community. The man would rather die than have people know what he's really like, and his finances? A total house of cards. My mom had witnessed it during their marriage. He'd spend way beyond his means to keep up appearances, taking out loans to pay other loans, the whole deal. Step 1 of the plan: expose him publicly. I started with calls to family members, my paternal grandmother first. She'd always been nice to me, even though we weren't super close. When I told her what happened, she first asked if I was sure, if there wasn't some misunderstanding. I expected that. Nobody wants to believe someone in their family could be that awful. So I emailed her the bank statements showing the complete withdrawal, screenshots of my stepsister's social media posts from the exact dates showing her Cancun trip and shopping sprees, and a recording of my phone call with my dad. Yeah, I recorded it. He learned to document everything growing up with him. Her tone changed completely. "I always knew your father had issues," she said. "But I never thought he'd stoop this low, not with his own child's future." I didn't stop there. I called every relative, every family friend, every connection we had in common. Some didn't believe me at first, others made excuses for him, but enough were disgusted by what he'd done, especially when I had receipts to back it up. Most of my aunts and uncles were shocked, but not completely surprised. Apparently my dad had a reputation in the family for being selfish, even as a kid. My uncle told me about how my dad had borrowed and crashed his car in high school, then let my uncle take the blame. "Your dad's always thought rules don't apply to him," he said. My cousin Jake was particularly helpful. He works at a credit union and was furious when he heard what happened. "Public records are your friend," he told me, explaining how to look up financial information that might help later. More on that in a bit. Then I took it nuclear. I wrote a detailed Facebook post. No dramatics, no name-calling, just the cold, hard facts with screenshots as proof. I explained how I'd worked since 16 to save for college, how I discovered all my money was gone, and how I found out it was funding my stepsister's luxury vacation. I ended with a simple question: what kind of father steals his child's education fund to buy his stepdaughter designer clothes? But I didn't just post it on my page. I posted it in our neighborhood Facebook group and the group for his golf club and tagged every family member and family friend I could think of. Then I sat back and watched the chaos unfold. The impact was immediate. The post exploded within hours. Comments, shares, messages flooding in from people I hadn't talked to in years. Everyone wanted to know if it was true, and everyone was horrified when I proved it was. People from his work saw it too. Turns out, one of his co-workers is married to one of my mom's friends. The co-workers shared it with their entire department. Dad's boss saw it. Clients saw it. Everyone saw it. My stepsister Mackenzie was the first to respond. commenting some nonsense about how she had no idea where the money came from and how I was trying to ruin her relationship with her dad. But she deleted her comment and blocked me within minutes. Karen, my stepmom, sent me this long private message about how I was being childish and airing family business in public and how I didn't understand their financial situation. I posted that too, with the caption, "Apparently, stealing $18,000 from your stepson is just family business these days." By evening, my dad's phone must have been blowing up because he called me, raging. He wasn't sorry. He was furious that I'd embarrassed him, that I'd made him look bad, that people were calling him about it. His boss had even pulled him aside at work to ask about the situation. Not once did he apologize. Not once did he acknowledge that what he did was wrong. He was just mad that I'd exposed him. He threatened to cut me off completely if I didn't delete the post immediately. I laughed at that. Cut me off from what? You already stole all my money. There's nothing left for you to take. When he tried to guilt me about destroying his reputation, I just replied with his own words, "You don't need your reputation right now. You can always rebuild it later." The silence on the other end of the line told me I'd hit the mark. When he finally spoke, his voice had this dangerous edge. "You're going to regret this. Not as much as you will," I replied and hung up. That night the real work began. Remember my cousin Jake from the credit union? He couldn't access my dad's records directly, that would be illegal, but he pointed me toward public resources where I could dig up dirt. Your dad cares about his image, right? Well, financial problems don't stay hidden forever, especially from the people in his house, Jake said. You just need to know where to look. Jake showed me how to search county records online, taught me about tax liens, property records, court judgments, all that stuff. He even helped me set up alerts so I'd know if any new records got filed under my dad's name. I spent the next week digging through every public database I could find, county records, court databases, property information, business filings. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused, methodical, out for blood. The county website was a goldmine. Turns out you can see if someone has tax liens, judgments, or property records, all public information. I found 3 tax liens from the past 5 years, a judgment from a credit card company he defaulted on, and multiple late payments on their mortgage. Nothing massive individually, but together, they painted a picture of a man drowning in debt while pretending to be successful. I also found out he'd taken a second mortgage on the house just 2 months ago. I'd bet anything that's where some of the money for Mackenzie's trip came from, on top of my savings. Then, I remembered something. When I was cleaning out my old room at his house last year, I'd found a stack of mail he'd hidden behind some books in his office. I'd ignored it then, thinking it was nothing important. Now I realized it might be financial stuff he was hiding from Karen. I called my old high school friend Melissa, who still had a key to Dad's house. She sometimes pet sat for them when they were away. She owed me for covering her shifts last summer, so she agreed to check if that stack was still there during her next visit. Jackpot. Not only was it there, but it had grown. She snapped photos of everything, collection notices, late payment warnings, loan rejection letters. There was even an application for a personal loan where he'd listed his income as $50,000 more than he actually made. The dude was in way deeper than even I'd thought. Melissa also found letters from 3 different credit card companies threatening to close his accounts due to late payments. And get this. She found a 4th maxed-out credit card statement hidden in a golf magazine, all dated within the last 2 months. My dad's house of cards was already wobbling before I came along. The final piece came from social media stalking. I created a spreadsheet tracking all their visible expenses over the past year. Vacations, restaurants, Mackenzie's shopping hauls, the new patio furniture, everything they'd posted about buying. Then I compared it with what I knew about my dad's salary from when he'd bragged about raises. I even went back through old posts and added up what they'd spent on Mackenzie's sweet 16 party, her car, her graduation trip to Hawaii, and all the designer stuff he'd bought her. Conservatively estimated, they'd spent over $40,000 just on Mackenzie's luxuries in the past year. No way his salary covered that, plus their mortgage, car payments, country club fees, and Karen's shopping addiction. The math wasn't mathing, not even a bit. Either he'd won the lottery, or he was financing their lifestyle with massive debt. With this information, I could have gone directly to Karen with everything, but that felt too obvious. Instead, I created an anonymous email account and sent selected documents to his boss and a few key coworkers. My dad worked at a financial services firm where reputation and trustworthiness were everything. An employee with hidden money problems and judgments against them? Not exactly the image they wanted to project. I also accidentally left a folder of printouts where Mackenzie would find them during one of her rare visits to drop off some of my old mail. She was nosy enough that I knew she'd look, and she'd definitely show her mom, but I didn't stop there. I sent an anonymous tip to the IRS, suggesting they might want to look into my dad's tax returns for the past few years. I had no idea if he'd committed tax fraud, but given everything else, it seemed likely. And even if they found nothing, the audit alone would be a nightmare for him. I also contacted the ethics department at his firm, anonymously, suggesting they review his client accounts for any irregularities. Again, no idea if he'd done anything wrong at work, but the investigation would put him under a microscope. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for everything to explode. And explode it did. But I had no idea just how badly things would go down when my dad finally realized he was cornered. I thought it would take at least a week for everything to explode. Nope, it took exactly 48 hours. My phone went nuts Tuesday night with texts from family. Apparently, my dad got called into some emergency meeting with his boss that afternoon. My cousin's wife works in the same building and overheard stuff about financial responsibility and company image. Not enough to fire him, but definitely put him on thin ice. But that was just the appetizer. The main course happened at home. Mackenzie found the folder, exactly like I planned. Being nosy as heck, she opened it, saw all those final notice and collection attempt stamps, and ran straight to Mommy Karen, who had no idea about their actual money situation for years. She completely lost it. So, Dad came home from his already terrible day at work to find Karen waiting with the folder spread out across the kitchen table. According to my grandmother, who heard it from my aunt. Yeah, family gossip and all. The neighbors actually called in a noise complaint because of the screaming. Karen was screaming so loud that their next-door neighbor texted me, asking if I knew what was going on. Next morning, Dad called me. He was pissed and straight-up panicked. He kept asking what I did if I said something to Karen or his boss. I played dumb. When I finally dropped that maybe he shouldn't have stolen my money, he went on, yelling about how I was destroying his life over little money and how I didn't understand adult finances and other nonsense. I just let him vent and then told him he should probably focus on keeping his job and wife instead of worrying about me. He said this isn't over before hanging up. He didn't know how right he was. The next few weeks were wild. Karen froze all their joint accounts and talked to some financial advisor. She found way more debt than even I discovered. Meanwhile, at work, Dad got pulled from client accounts and stuck doing back-office paperwork. His commissions dried up, so his income took a massive hit. Mackenzie went totally silent on social media after weeks of flexing her Cancun pics. When she finally posted again, it was some vague quote about learning who's really there for you. No more designer clothes selfies or bragging about daddy's gifts. Family gatherings got super awkward. According to my grandma, people who used to kiss my dad's butt now avoided him completely. Conversations stopped when he walked in. His golden boy image was totally wrecked. About a month after my Facebook post, Karen kicked him out for real, changed his stuff into the front yard, and garbage bags. Turns out the house was in her name the whole time, so he was screwed. Now my dad, Mr. Perfect Image, was living in some crappy apartment. His BMW got repossessed. Karen was selling his fancy watches on eBay. Then came the night everything went to another level. I was closing at the restaurant around 11 p.m. when I finally headed out to the nearly empty parking lot. I was digging for my keys when I noticed someone leaning against my car. It was my dad, looking like a complete mess. Wrinkled clothes, messy hair, reeking of booze. "You happy now?" he slurred. "I've lost everything." I tried to walk past him. "You should go." "You're wasted," I said. That's when he grabbed my arm and spun me around. "Don't walk away from me, you piece of trash. You think you can destroy my life with no consequences?" I pulled away and reminded him that he'd stolen my earned money, so he already knew all about consequences. Something snapped in him then. He shoved me hard against my car, knocking the wind out of me. Before I could recover, his fist connected with my ribs. The pain was shocking. I couldn't believe he'd actually hit me. "You're going to fix this," he growled, punching me again in the shoulder. "Tell everyone you lied." I tried to shield myself, but he was bigger and stronger. Another hit caught me in the side. I managed to break away and stumble sideways. He lunged at me, but I sidestepped, and he crashed into my car. The alarm started blaring, and that's when my manager, Jose, came running out of the restaurant. "Hey, what the heck is going on?" Jose shouted. My dad tried to act normal, but it was way too late. I pulled out my phone and told him I was calling the cops. He just spat near my feet, said I was dead to him, and stumbled back to his car. Jose stayed with me until the cops showed up like 5 minutes later. They took our statements, photographed my bruises, and put out an alert for my dad's car. They caught him trying to drive home and added a DUI to his assault charges. I went to the hospital, just bruising, no broken ribs, thank God, and filed for a restraining order that night. When they asked if I wanted to press charges for assault, I didn't hesitate to say yes. I stayed at my mom's that night. She wasn't surprised he'd snapped when he lost control of his precious image. By morning, the whole family knew. Any support Dad had left was gone. My grandmother texted that she was sorry for ever defending him and asked what I needed. The assault case changed everything. This wasn't just some family drama anymore, it was public record. My dad wasn't just the guy who played favorites, he was the guy who beat up his own son in a parking lot. The assault case changed everything. What started as family drama turned into something my dad couldn't talk his way out of. Funny how bruises in police reports don't care about your excuses. I got a lawyer through my mom's college friend who does family law. She hooked us up with a reduced rate, thank God, since I was broke. Wonder why. First priority was making sure the restraining order stuck. Dad couldn't come within 500 feet of me, my home, or work. Of course, he tried to weasel out of it. Had my cousin call me, saying he was really sorry and wanted to work things out privately. Yeah, right. Translation: he was scared to death about going to court and wanted me to drop the charges. My lawyer told me to ignore all that noise. Court was pretty much what you'd expect. I showed up with my mom, still had wrapped ribs and fading bruises. Dad showed up alone and no Karen or Mackenzie backing him up. Shocker. I won't bore you with all the legal stuff, but basically they had security footage, my manager's statement, and photos of my injuries. Dad's lawyer tried the whole just a family argument that got out of hand angle. The judge basically called nonsense on that logic, like, did he really think he told people I stole his money was a good defense for assault? Genius move there, Dad. Long story short, he took a plea deal. 6 months probation, anger management classes, 100 hours community service, fines for both assault and DUI, a permanent restraining order, and he had to pay my medical bills, plus a shiny new criminal record that'll follow him forever. Not jail time, but I was cool with that. Watching his life implode was better punishment anyway. The probation terms screwed him even harder than I expected. Regular check-ins with his parole officer meant taking time off work. Community service ate his weekends, anger management classes weren't cheap, and here's the funny thing. His apartment was too close to mine under the restraining order terms, so he had to break his lease and move again. Couldn't have planned that one better myself. Oh, and the family fallout was brutal. My grandma called me after the news story ran. She was beyond pissed, said she'd been making excuses for his behavior for decades and was done enabling him. She literally updated her will the next week to remove him completely. Dad had been counting on that inheritance to fix his money problems, so oops. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding. The victim services people hooked me up with emergency financial aid for college. It wasn't the full amount Dad stole, but enough to get started. Mom co-signed a small loan for the rest. I found a cheaper apartment with a roommate, picked up more shifts, landed a small scholarship, and bought myself a decent used car with my own money. First thing I owned outright, no strings. Not the smooth ride I'd planned after saving for years, but I was making it work. Most importantly, I was free from his nonsense forever. The restraining order was basically a dad-repellent shield. About a month post-court, Karen was divorcing his butt and had found even more financial secrets during discovery. He'd been taking out credit cards in her name, skimming from their savings, even borrowing against their house without telling her. The final nail in Dad's coffin came about 2 months after court, when his firm finally fired him. They'd kept him on desk duty through the legal stuff, but once everything was official, they cut him loose for violation of company ethics policy. Translation: we don't want a convicted abuser managing people's money, you psycho. With no job, no wife, mounting legal bills, and a criminal record, he ended up in a Roach Motel apartment in the next city over, working at a call center. The guy who used to brag about his corner office now spends his days getting yelled at by strangers about their cable bills. Life comes at you fast. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. Then I remember him stealing my future without a second thought, remember the feeling of his fist hitting my ribs. He made his choices, I just cashed the karma check.